Good morning. Today we're going to talk codominance. And when you think codominance, that prefix co, think together, like a co-captain, you captain together, a co-pilot, you pilot the plane together, co-CEOs, you both run the company together. So in codominance, you have two alleles that share dominance. They are both dominant. And so both of the traits will appear in the phenotype when there's a hybrid. So remember, a hybrid, you have one of each type of allele. In this case, they're both dominant and they both show up. Our I can statements. I can complete and interpret Punnett squares that involve codominant alleles. So we're going to do Punnett squares when we have a codominant trait. And I can determine the outcomes of a genetic cross involving codominant alleles. So once you make the Punnett square, you can also determine the outcomes and the probabilities. An example here, if you have a Siamese cat and a Persian cat, and they mate, you get a Himalayan cat. And so you can see you've got the features of the Siamese and you've got the long coat of the Himalayan or the Persian. Codominance is going to occur when two alleles are equally dominant and they both appear in a phenotype. The classic example would be human blood type, and we'll talk a lot this week about blood types. But in human blood type, A is dominant and B is dominant. And so if a person inherits the A allele from one parent and the B allele from another parent, the individual will have type AB blood. Both the A and the B will show up when the blood is typed. And you can also see the cow here. You have the white cow and the red cow, and it's going to create something called a roan, which is the red and white together. So again, codominance, both appear in the phenotype. Codominance results in a phenotype that shows both traits. So here you have the white camellia and the red camellia flower. If you cross the two, it's not pink, it's red and white. So it's important to remember that in a true codominance, both alleles will show up individually in the phenotype. So you've got red and white spotted flowers. So we'll do a little fictitious one here. If mer people have tail color alleles B for blue and G for green that follow the codominance inheritance rule, what are the possible genotypes and phenotypes? So you got to think about this for a minute. If blue is dominant and green is dominant, notice that I get to use B for blue and G for green. So both get to use their letter, and both of them are capitalized, meaning that they are both dominant. So you could have a pure blue-tailed merperson that's big B, and pure blue. You could have a merperson that's pure green and have big G, big G. But if one parent gives the dominant blue and the other gives the other codominant green, then the merperson will have a genotype of big B, big G. Both letters get to appear, both letters get to be dominant. And the merperson will have blue and green in their tail. So if you look, I try to be all cute there and go blue, green, blue, green, blue, green, just to remind you that that merperson has both colors visible in their phenotype. Let's look at the chickens. We have black chickens, white chickens, and then the checkered or the black and white feathered chickens. So if you have a pure black feathered chicken, big B, crossed with a pure white feathered chicken, big W, then offspring will inherit one gene allele for black feathers and one gene allele for white feathers. Since in this case, these feathers are codominant, they both use their letter and the offspring will have big B, big W. When you go to write the genotype, we will write them in alphabetical order. So that's why I have the B listed first and the W listed second. Just put them in alphabetical order, both using their letters, both letters getting capitalized. And that will indicate when you see two letters both capitalized, you have a codominant trait. and your offspring will have black and white feathers. Incomplete dominance occurs when you have a phenotype that blends the two parents' alleles together. So when you have a heterozygous allele pair, like an R for red and a white or a W for white, they will actually blend together to make a pink. So it's not quite what we talked about with codominance. It's incomplete. So the dominant color is incomplete. It doesn't fully show up. It blends the two together. So here we've got a red and a white making a pink flower. When you did your create a baby on the website on Friday, there were a lot of traits that were incomplete. I think eye shape was one. You could have large eyes, small eyes, and if you got one of each of those alleles, then the eyes were medium. Same thing with hair. You could have straight and curly, and then wavy was the incomplete dominance. So here we'll go to Harry Potter, and I must admit that I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan. Not that I don't like it. I just have never really gotten into it. I've never read the books. But Mr. Jones and Mrs. Domingo love Harry Potter, so it's in here. If the dragons in Harry Potter have firepower alleles, which is a capital F for strong fire, and the F with a little apostrophe for no fire that follow the incomplete dominance, what are the phenotypes for the following? So remember, incomplete blends the two. So if you had a big F, you're going to have strong fire. If you had a big F and a big F with a little apostrophe, it's going to be a medium or a moderate fire because they blend together. And the two apostrophes would give you no fire at all. If we look at blood types, and this is one we're going to spend a lot of time this week on, we have multiple alleles where two are codominant and one is recessive. So up till now, we've kind of just talked about codominant sharing dominance, but we never have talked about what if you throw a recessive allele in with it. So for the multiple alleles, this is where you have two or more that share dominance, and then you also have a third that is recessive. So in this case, A is dominant, B is dominant, and O is recessive. So it creates for some different possibilities for genotypes. So let's say a person has type A blood. They can be homozygous type A or pure, which would be big A, big A. But a person could also be type A blood and be heterozygous or a hybrid for their A blood, and they have the A allele and then the recessive O allele. Let me go back one here. Same thing can hold true for type B blood. You could be homozygous, pure B, and be big B, or it could be heterozygous and a B with a recessive O. And because O is recessive, just like an A, the B will overpower the O, and the person will still have type B blood. If a person inherits the allele for A blood from one parent and the allele for type B blood from the other parent, since A and B are both dominant and they share their dominance, the person will have what's called type AB blood, and both the A and the B will show up when the blood is typed. If a person receives only type O blood alleles from both parents, so mom gave the child type O blood gene and dad gave the child the type O blood gene allele, then the person will have type O blood, which is recessive. And because there are no A's or B's mixed in, then the O gets to show itself and it's type O blood. So the only way you can have recessive type O blood is if both parents give you the O allele. If you have an A and an O, since the A is dominant and the O is recessive, A will overpower O. And if you have a B and an O, because the B is also dominant, B will also overpower O, and that person would have B blood. So here's where we typically would turn to a partner and see what you could do with this. So if parents have type A blood and they're heterozygous for their A, which is an A and an O, and the other parent has type B blood but is homozygous for its type B blood, meaning big B, what could all the possible outcomes for genotypes and phenotypes be for their children? So take a moment and see if you can come up with what the Punnett square would look like. we would put the one parent along the top and the other parent at the side. And we'd fill out the Punnett square the same way you would fill out the Punnett square for any normal Mendelian trait. The A and the B would come together in this first box here. This B and O come together here. This A and this B come together here. And this B and this O come together there. So in this case, the children could be type AB blood, and there would be a 50% chance because there are 2 out of the 4 that are AB. Or the person could inherit type B blood. Because the B is dominant and the O is recessive, the B will overpower the O, and it would be a 50% chance of having type B blood. I will put the notes at the end of the day in the notes folder, and you can watch the video. We won't start the video now, I'll let you do that on your own. Please keep your note document open after you submit and use your notes to help you with today's work. I encourage you to always use your notes. The notes are given to you because they are the most important parts of what you're going to need to know in order to do your activity today. So use the notes to help you complete the activity. And if you don't score a perfect, you have multiple attempts, go back in and give it another try.